Mythical creatures have been the physical embodiment of fear for centuries. Most are simple. Dragons, fear of reptiles and fire. Ghosts, the undead. Mermaids, well, those were created for, other reasons. But all these creatures were ways of teaching kids lessons about the world. One such monster is the result of more real apparent threats. A threat that, if were real, would be one of the biggest threats to humanity. The wendigo. The wendigo is the embodiment of cannibalism. A much more realistic threat than fire-breathing reptiles. Somewhere around the 16th century, people realized, hey, it's bad to eat other humans! Shocker. Their solution? A story of a monstrous spirit that would possess anyone who is greedy enough to eat human flesh. Sounds scary, but the original wendigo didn't even look nearly as grotesque as it does now. Instead of a scary elk-like zombie, early wendigos were depicted as having long limbs, skinny, claws, fangs, and even some were depicted as rotting, with organs visible and all. But worst of all, the wendigo was bald! I know, horrifying, right? Luckily, there are a few stories from colder regions claiming that some wendigos had white hair. That being said, I'm going to include both descriptions, not because I'm biased, but I like the zombie deer elk thing that's going on. Now, the wendigo is said to target greedy people who eat humans. And I'm not sure if this includes hungry, nice people, but I don't think the wendigo cares if you saved a kitten from a tree. This isn't a demon who's going to target only the greedy people. This is a monster, so everyone's on the chop block. Once the wendigo possesses someone, they're gone. The wendigo takes over the body and will eat humans till the end of time. Sounds like a pretty scary monster, but what's so special about it? Well, it's actually one of the most overpowered mythical creatures that could destroy all human society, yet nobody's talking about it. Let's start with their infinite power. All the information I talk about today is based off mythology.net, which usually follows the original folklore very well, but some information might be different compared to others out there, but that's to be expected with mythical creatures. Alright, let's talk about the wendigo's infinite power. When the wendigo consumes someone, it grows in proportion with the mass it eats. It grows in proportion with the mass it eats. This is wild. I'll put it in perspective for you. If I eat a 1-pound steak, I don't gain 1 pound. The steak I've consumed has turned into energy for your metabolism, activities, and producing heat. Only about 10 to 20% of what I eat turns into fat. Now, of course, this varies greatly. A steak with a lot of nutrients will produce a lot more energy, while something like a donut will give you very little nutritional value and will produce more fat. But the wendigo doesn't have this problem. If it eats a 1-pound steak, it gains 1 pound. This isn't just growth. This is doomsday levels of math. Why is this overpowered? Well, wendigos eat humans. After a quick Google search, the average human is 136 pounds, or 26 kilograms. Lower than I thought. Regardless, for every human the wendigo eats, it gains that person's weight. If a 100-pound wendigo eats a 136-pound person, it's now 236 pounds. It's over double its original weight. Not only does this mean the wendigo can infinitely grow to sizes humans can't even comprehend, it also never gets tired. Yep, never gets tired, ever. Since all of the energy the wendigo consumes goes straight to the wendigo size, that means there are no nutrients for this creature to use. And if the wendigo doesn't need nutrients to survive, that means the body doesn't consume any energy, aka the cells will never get tired. Wait, but how can a creature be alive if their body doesn't have any energy to move? Well, the wendigo is actually a spirit. No need for energy, it just grows forever, just like a terrifying meat balloon. But once you realize this is a spirit, you suddenly unlock a whole host of new abilities. Abilities that no one ever talks about. Of course, the wendigo possesses people. That's how it gets its human body. And of course, we talked about how it can grow infinitely. But since the wendigo is a spirit, it actually has ghost powers too. And I'm not joking here. The wendigo has the ability to become invisible, fly, and become undetectable. Yeah, imagine this thing flying! Do you think it flaps its arms like it's doing the chicken dance? It also has an amazing sense of smell, hearing, and sight, allowing it to track prey from miles away. not feet or yards, but miles away. It can also control winter storms and bring famine. Plus, it's incredibly strong and fast. It's basically Superman if he was hangry all the time. With all this together, it's only a matter of time before the Wendigo grows out of control and eats everyone in the world. This guy is stacked, but he must have a weakness, right? Well, not many. Silver, fire, charms, and magical amulets are said to be his only weakness. But this feels more like someone forgot to give their OP character a weakness, so they just threw a whole bunch of weaknesses and hoped nobody would notice.
Cake.
Yes, cake is my weakness, along with speed and strength. Strength is my weakness.
Fire is just unreliable. It goes out, it needs constant fueling, and it's not great for long range, unless it's on an arrow. The only way to actually kill this thing is to shatter its icy heart, which we'll talk about how difficult that is later.
Well, how about something more magical?
Charms and magical amulets only ward off the Wendigo, but the Wendigo takes these as more of a mild suggestion to back off, rather than a rule, so it can still attack if it wants. Okay, but silver bullets could easily stop it. Well, let's run some scenarios, shall we? The Wendigo can sense people from miles away, so there is no sneaking up on it. Maybe you try to bait it in with someone who definitely volunteered to be Wendigo bait and is definitely not a hostage. This is a good approach, but the Wendigo has something most monsters don't have: intelligence. Even though the Wendigo is constantly driven by its never-ending hunger, it's not recklessly charging through the woods for its next meal. The Wendigo is actually smart enough to save up entrails of its victims and hide them away in barrels, or even keep victims alive and living emergency food sources. This isn't just a squirrel burying its nuts in the winter. This is a monster keeping people alive to eat later. It also tends to stalk its prey, so it would most likely see you setting up the trap. Alright, let's assume the Wendigo hasn't suspected anything. Remember how it can sense anything within a mile? That includes you roosting up in your tree. Okay, fine. Let's say you plant your willing volunteer and hide several miles away with your trusty gun in hand. Sorry, buddy, but your scent is going to linger in the area. Once the Wendigo catches a whiff of something it smells, it is said to know exactly where the person is, regardless of how far away you are. Oh, no worries, I'll just stay a few miles away and send my volunteer alone, and they'll willingly go through the forest to be Wendigo bait. Alright, let's assume somehow, despite being miles away and presumably a forest with all sorts of barriers, you manage to shoot the Wendigo. That doesn't guarantee it's dead. The Wendigo can heal very quickly, and also the bullet has to hit the Wendigo's icy heart and shatter it. But for story's sake, let's say you shot the heart and it shattered. Now you have the process of disposing of the body, and let me tell you, that's not easy. First, the shards of the creature's heart must be placed in a silver box and buried in consecrated ground. Next, the body must be dismembered with a silver weapon, slated and cremated. The ashes must be scattered into the four winds, and if you fail to follow any of these steps, the Wendigo will resurrect, and guess what? You just made it mad, and it will come for its revenge. And this is assuming it's still small, and not 30 stories high at this point. If a Wendigo continues to consume things, it could start eating groups of people, whole towns, or even cities, and maybe even the world. Alright, but before the Wendigo can eat the world, it has to start off with just a few people at a time. So let's start a little bit smaller. Let's say the government spots the Wendigo when it's relatively small, maybe 2 or 3 stories high. They could use silver bullets, silver-embedded grenades, and flamethrowers. But there's no way this army is going to be able to get close enough to actually shoot this thing. Even if they somehow snuck up on it, when it can sense everything within its vicinity, they still have to deal with its invisibility and flying. If the Wendigo at any point realizes the government is trying to kill it, it would definitely turn invisible, fly away, or start a blizzard to escape. It can then choose to run away or pick off the army one by one. Or you know what? Maybe it'll just stick around and spread its disease. Yes, the Wendigo can actually turn people into Wendigos without even touching them. Infection. Illnesses like wendigo psychosis and wendigo fever are actually what people of these cultures believe to be true. Today, most doctors say the wendigo psychosis is over-exaggerated and not a real disease, but there are a few cases of it existing. This is a bit of a gross story, but it's completely true. And it's not the only real-life case of wendigo psychosis out there. Swift Runner was a man in 1878. He and his family were facing starvation during a harsh winter. Somehow, their oldest son died, and the family had to live off of his body. Swift then killed his wife and 5 kids, claiming he enjoyed the taste. And at this point, it wasn't out of survival, because just 25 miles away was an outpost where they could have gotten food when the weather had lightened up. Swift pled guilty to wendigo psychosis and was executed. It's pretty easy to see how stories like Swift Runner's turn into the wendigo of myth. But all of this just proves how dangerous and devastating this illness could be. One second you're raising your family, the next you're eating them. It's said that all this illness needs to spread is to be exposed to the malevolent spirit of the wendigo. Great, now it's airborne! The horror movie just became the pandemic. All the wendigo actually needs to do is hang around the camp invisible and spread the infection. Before long, the military will be playing a big game of Among Us trying to figure out who's infected, while the wendigo picks off more people one by one. Alright, I've talked about how you could never defeat the wendigo, but what would a winning scenario look like? Well, inevitably, the wendigo would grow so large that bullets wouldn't do anything. It won't even bother to hide behind its invisibility as it eats entire towns. Now, there is one silver lining, and that being a silver-coated bomb. Assuming a plane can fly through the wendigo's storm and land a bomb directly on the wendigo's chest, the heart could shatter in the explosion. Wendigo's dead, right? But it's not that easy. Remember, now we have to dispose of the body. But it'll take weeks to find every heart shard. The body will take weeks, if not months, to cremate, and delivering the giant packages of ashes to spread to the 4 winds will take at least a few more days, if not weeks. We're looking at a minimum of a month of work, if not more, to get rid of the body so it doesn't reincarnate. If just one shard of his heart got caught in the wind, or a dog ate even just a sliver of its meat, the wendigo would reincarnate. This thing is harder to kill than Anoka 3310. When it's all over, you'll celebrate knowing you took down the monster that could have ruined the world. But there is no winning against the wendigo, because at the end of the day, this isn't just a monster you can erase. This is the embodiment of greed, hunger, and selfishness. Anyone can turn into the wendigo. The only way to truly defeat the wendigo would be for the human race to go extinct. That's why the wendigo is the most powerful monster. Greed will always exist. It'll always come back, either in the body of a greedy CEO, or maybe it'll inhabit you. As you stare at your ramen noodles rotating in the microwave, the hunger eats away at you until you're the one being devoured. Until next time, keep exploring history, one creature at a time.